Welcome to a new episode of the Spiritual and Ambitious podcast. And today we are talking about astrotherapy. Yes, I said that right. I'm so excited to talk about astrology and therapy combined. And I'm not going to be the one really talking about it because I brought on a guest expert, and my guest expert's name is Christina Fitch. I saw some amazing social media and articles, which led me to Christina's website. And I thought, oh my gosh, combining astrology with psychotherapy, this has to be amazing. And so welcome, Christina, to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Whitney. Thank you for having me.
I am very excited to dive into this topic. And so I want to just ask you, one, how did you get into astrotherapy? This sounds so fun and it's such a beautiful combination.
How did I get into astrotherapy? Well, so astrotherapy, it's a creation, I guess, of my skills. I've been into astrology since I was a kid. Never like doing official schooling, just reading books and so forth. And then I became a therapist. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. And as I was going through my training and I was incorporating astrology, I noticed that a lot of the things that I would pick up on my clients' personalities were also showing up in their, personality tests that were being done in the clinical setting. But I had a different way of approaching it. So I started just combining the two, and the more when I would have clients that were open to allowing me to look at their birth charts, I would be able to share things with them, and they would just look at me like, oh my God, like, how do you know me that well? And I'm like, well, it's all here in your birth chart. I've often said that, humans don't come with owner manuals, except for we do. It's called your birth chart. Unfortunately, the Western model doesn't fully recognize astrology, and they look at it as a religion or a spiritual tool, which, yes, I agree, it can be that. But there's a lot of science behind it. I mean, I honestly think that it's the oldest science in existence and that any other sciences come from it. Because, well, astrology is our stars, it's our planet, it's, the sun and the moon. And all those things were here before we were. So if there's science, then astrology must be science too, right?
I believe it. I was always interested in astrology since I was really, really young. And I remember it might have been like my 9th or 10th birthday. I wanted an astrology chart of my birth. I wanted the birth chart. And my mom got it for me. I was that young. But I could not understand it because it's literally a science. There's so many components and so many parts. And I love 100%. How you said it is a manual. I never thought about that. I like how you put it that way. And I think a lot of our listeners are going to be really happy to hear about your journey, because some of the questions I get from entrepreneurs, and especially those out there who are therapists, they'll say, how do I combine my spiritual skill set, whatever it is, and what can I combine? Like, how do I do it? So I just have to ask you, because I know we have a lot of interested listeners. Did you ever feel like there was a resistance to incorporating the astrology part with the therapy part?
Not for me. For the rest of the world of psychology, absolutely.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, it's not even recognized as a therapeutic modality, which to me is mind-blowing, seeing as one of our grandfathers of psychology was like, he was an astrologer, and he's even said that, psychotherapy will be a dinosaur until it incorporates astrology. And, as I was doing my schooling for my master's program, Um, I chose the program that I went to because it had the depth and spiritual specialization. I
Mm.
also just so happened to the astrology school that I actually went through, because I do recommend that, by the way. A lot of people do self-study, and I mean, I was self-studied for a long time, but then I did decide to do astrology school with Debra Silverman. I don't know if you've heard of Debra, but
Yeah, I took it too.
she's been. Oh, did you?
I
Okay,
did. Only up to
okay.
level two.
So then
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, she's
Okay, so
amazing.
I've done all three levels with her, and she graduated with her master's degree from the same school I did. And she's been studying the correlation of astrology and psychology her entire career. So she really helped me like her dialogue, right? You know what I'm talking about. That really helped us to kind of like bring everything together. And then she really focuses on Saturn, which, oh my god, that blew my mind open. And like going through that, I'm like, okay, yes, because as a psychotherapist, I always take my clients and I try to have them do their life story, right? And like their lifestyle, if I can get them even to go back to their first Saturn square when they were around 7, right? If I can have them go back there, what do you remember about that time of your life? They may not remember specific things, but there might be something very specific. um, so I do that. The other aspects that I really do look at, even though Deborah's program doesn't talk about it much, is I look at the north nodes. Whenever people are like, I keep having this happen, and it's like, okay, well, what is your north nodes? Where is that? Like, what are the themes of your chart? I'm actually doing a lot of work right now with Pluto. Pluto has kind of really just came forward for me, mainly because a lot of stuff that is going on in my life, I really do think it's Pluto messing with me. Well, I should say messing with me, but I definitely feel like Pluto's been a big player in my life, specifically over the last 15 years, because my journey, my deep dive into my generational work started in 2008 when Pluto entered Capricorn, which just so happens to be where my IC is. And
Mm.
it's also my seventh house of relationships. So it's so much like all of my relationships, my relationship with myself, my relationship with everybody else is transformed since 2008.
Wow. That's amazing. There's so much information. I like how you can pull from these different resources, and also what you have found in your own work that works for you. And that's where I feel a lot of people kind of get tripped up. Sometimes, we're trying to, first of all, I think it's so important to learn. Absolutely. Absolutely. But then I
Mm-hmm.
love it when my students will start to learn more in a different way, learn about themselves. And so what I love is you've kind of said, well, but for me, I think it's important to hone in on these specific areas with my clients, and that's speaking to me. And so interesting. Absolutely. So, one of the questions I should have asked you in the beginning before we go any further is, could you share with everybody your definition of what astrotherapy actually is? I said kind of a combination, but you are the expert here. What is astrotherapy according to you?
So, astrotherapy for me is just utilizing your birth chart to one, deep dive into your patterns, because we all have our patterns that are just who we are, right? I explore those patterns. How are they beneficial for you, and how have they been harmful or hurtful or problematic for you? And then I give tools on how to navigate those. And then I use it to look at your personality. So many people have they allow other people to project their idea of who they are onto them, instead of really being able to understand, no, this is actually me. This is me. That's you. Where, when I go over a chart and I have somebody like, oh my God, that is me. Okay, so that's not, they keep telling me this, but that's not who I am. It's like, no, it's not who you are. That's them. So this is who you are. These are your personality traits. Now let's go from there. And
Mm.
then, so I really find that astrology helps you figure out who you are as a person so that you can know how to navigate you. And the more you know how to navigate you, the more you can navigate your surroundings as well. So to me, it's a win-win for everybody.
Oh, yeah. I'm thinking what's coming up is a lot of highly sensitive people or empaths. I can imagine that could be so helpful because sometimes empaths will say to me, how do I know it's my stuff or somebody else's stuff? And I love that this helps to get to know themselves better. Like it sounds like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
self-growth, meeting yourself, exploring those areas that maybe you've even hidden and it's coming out more into the light. And then I love what you said too about something you were kind of exploring was intergenerational things. And so this
Yeah.
sounds really, really interesting. And I've got more questions for you when we come back after this quick break. As a professional psychic medium, I've done tens of thousands of readings, but I felt a call to move more fully into teaching intuition. But I still get so many requests about doing readings. So while I don't do readings anymore, I have brought in some very trusted colleagues who are now available for live 1 hour readings on Zoom. If you would like to book your psychic medium reading, go to messengerofspirit.com/appointments to see our available readers and schedule your Zoom reading today. Welcome back. I'm here with Christina Fitch, and we're talking about astrotherapy. And I think that this is just the crack of the book. It reminds me of, when you start reading that first page of a chapter and it's like, oh, it's hooked. I'm hooked. I just want to read more. So we're talking about astrotherapy. I've got to ask you, what do you feel really stands out for you with astrotherapy? Like, what's one of the first things that you might kind of gravitate to that you could share with our listeners that they might even be able to kind of see in their charts? Like maybe there's, one planet or a specific area that tells themselves something like, oh, I need to pay attention to this.
So as a therapist, it's never fail. Everybody wants to know about their relationships, about their love life, about are they the one? Are they, when am I going to meet the love of my life? Things like that. And I don't do predictive astrology. I leave that to the professionals on that. But we focus as astrologers really a lot on the sun, the moon, and the rising, which great, because that really gives you an understanding of who you are. But when it comes to love and it comes to relationships and how you're going to be in those relationships, I always look at the Venus and the Mars as well as the Mercury, because it's all about how you communicate, how you love, how you fight. And then I also like, especially if in regards to, couples, right? Or if you're, dating somebody or so forth. One of the things that I really focus on is synastry. I know a lot of people do composite charts and so forth. I find that synastry charts are way, way more accurate because it takes two individual charts and just lays them on top of each other. So for me as a therapist, to me, like a composite chart is almost like, and I want to be very mindful with saying this, but it's like the composite chart to me is like the codependent relationship where you're enmeshing together, whereas the synastry is actually interdependency, where it's your chart and their chart and how is it going to play together,
Yeah.
right? And then also in there, I can tell you like, okay, this is why this is happening. This is why that is such an intense energy. This is why you're like adverse to this. And I can really help people hone in on that. I love doing both individuals and couples with this, especially when couples like, if they're fighting or something, I'm like, okay, well, of course you're fighting because this is happening and this is happening and this is happening. So
Oh, that's
Does
a
that answer your
juicy.
question?
It does. It's a juicy little nugget. I'm like, oh, a composite versus synastry. Like that's a lot of light bulb moments right there. That's so interesting. So I've got more questions, of course. What if somebody wants to work with you? Would you say one session? Would you say multiple sessions? What do you feel?
It depends on what they're going through. Typically, I'll tell you, when I come to it as just a therapist, this is why I really want to move towards just doing astrotherapy. Um, I have to do a lot of guessing games. I mean, I'm really good at my job. I'm really good at being able to pick out what I need to pick out and ask the right questions. But when I can look at somebody's chart and have that, I know I can dive way deeper into things. I can tell them exactly what's going on, why they're feeling what they're feeling,
Mhm.
and explore even like, I obviously I don't tell them. I just kind of explore and I give them like the main energies, and then I let them tell me like, well, how is that showing up for you, right? Um, I feel like one session will give you a lot of answers of just what you're experiencing, why you're experiencing it, and everything that has gone on throughout your life. And then if there's like specific things that you're struggling with, that's where we'll do more sessions. I am not the therapist that wants you to be coming to me every week for multiple like years. I am one of those therapists. Let's get you stable. Let's get you moving forward. And then let's do check-ins like every month or every 2 months or and I kind of push them out as necessary. Whereas traditional therapy, some people are going to therapy 3 times a week. That's to me, I mean, if you're going through it, if you're like having a moment, like if you're in your Saturn return or like some really intense aspect is hitting your chart and you're really needing some solid like guidance, then yes, by all means. And then there's also like, as far as sessions, usually the first session we get through so much, and then I just leave it up to them. Like, do you want to continue and do a certain amount of sessions, or do you want to just come in for check-ins?
Yeah.
And then a lot of times I'll do one, and then they'll be like, can I get my partner to come in on this? Absolutely. Let's do it. Right. And then if the partner is open to a one-on-one, so to go over just their birth chart, I do that. And then I will bring them in together and do the synastry chart and kind of, just navigate and help them explore what is happening for them.
That sounds very empowering. It's like I'm going to help you, but I also want to eventually kind of be at that place where you feel healed or you feel like, okay, we don't need to be doing this all the time. I think that's really coming from an empowering place, which I really love. And I was also thinking, I'm going to be going through my Uranus opposite Uranus, and I'm like, that would probably be one of those things where you might need a couple different sessions. So I'm like, I get it.
Okay, so I will be really honest. I just went through my Uranus opposition, um, and I really wish I would have had somebody like me to be
Yeah.
navigating that time because, whew, it was interesting. We'll just say that. We'll say that.
Oh yeah.
So,
My husband went through that a couple years ago and it was interesting. So I told him because we talked about what was going on and then he started to understand it from an astrology point of view. And so I told him this year, I'm like, this year's my year for that. And he's like, oh great. Oh boy, can't wait. Like, yeah, I know.
yeah, I currently have Saturn on my midheaven. I currently have Neptune opposite my moon. And
Hmm.
I currently have Pluto trine my moon. So, and I'm about to have my Jupiter return. So we'll see how the next few months go. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm also in my Mars return as well.
Oh
So
boy. And for everybody
I've got a lot
listening,
going on.
you do, absolutely. And for everybody listening that's like, what does that mean? Then you can sign up to talk to Christina, and we're going to tell you how to get actually a free consultation with her, but then we'll tell you how to actually book a astrotherapy session with her too. But I did want to ask you this one question, because I'll get this sometimes, and you're the expert here. What if somebody says, Christina, I just don't feel connected to my sun sign? What
Mm.
does that mean? What are maybe some reasons why somebody wouldn't feel so connected to their sign?
Well, because there's other things going on in your chart. If you have a lot of, so I'll use mine for example. Um, I'm a Taurus sun. And yes, I do identify with a lot of Taurus traits. But there was always this aspect of me that I was like, no, I feel like I'm more of an Aries. So back a few years ago, when they were trying to change all the signs, and I'm like, that actually does make sense because I do feel more like an Aries. Well, I realized the reason I feel so much like an Aries is because I have my Venus and my Mars in Aries. And not only do I have my Venus and my Mars in Aries, my Venus and my Mars, but I also have a fire trine. So I have a
Mm.
lot of fire energy. And so I'm like, oh, okay, that's why I feel that way. So if you don't necessarily, identify with your sun sign, it's probably because there's a different energy in your chart that you're going to be feeling more intensely for one reason or another.
I think that's really helpful for people out there kind of trying to figure out what that means to them. And
Yeah.
that's definitely something that I feel like people will say, I need more fire in my life, or I'm not feeling that passion or that zest. And so I love that you can look at the chart and kind of see what's going on, or, maybe there's a transit happening or something like that, which I think is really interesting. And so I want to pull a couple cards just to see what spirit says that maybe we need to address, or a message today. And so the first card I have here is, so people hate this card. It's clear your mind. You're blocking what you need to receive. And the second card, I'm not surprised actually, is the sacral chakra. And it's you're worthy, reassess your value, and what you value, but also it's a relationship. So, what I get from this is like uncover what blocks you might be experiencing, or resistance, especially. And it's funny, it's like, and in the relationships, and here you are, Christina, everybody wants to know about relationships. So I just wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
does anything come up for you specifically with these cards around your topic?
Oh, well, I think it's so interesting that's there. A couple of reasons. One, it's pretty much what I'm personally experiencing. But two, um, the sacral chakra is always connected to your sex, your sex drive, and just everything around sex and sensuality and and so forth. And man, is that a topic.
Yeah.
Um, Couples across the world, like humans in general, struggle so much with their sexuality. It is magnificent and beautiful and passionate, but it can also be very, very painful. It can be very traumatic. A lot of people have a lot of sexual trauma.
Mm.
And to me, if you are depending on what kind of a relationship you're in, like talking about your mind getting in your way of that, it can, if you have trauma in that area, it is very difficult to clear your mind in regards to that area
Oh,
of life.
yeah. I can see that. Absolutely.
And not only that, but this is also coming to me. There's a lot of women, there's a lot of shame around
Mhm.
anything sexual in both men and women
Yeah.
for different reasons, right? So me being a woman with my Venus and Mars in Aries, I've struggled. I've struggled hardcore with that because that is not a feminine energy
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to that. Whereas a lot of men, if they had their Venus or their Mars in a water sign, that's not going to be very natural for them based off societal standards of men,
Wow.
right? And what a
Yeah.
man should be. So I think that astrology also really breaks down the gender divides. It really breaks apart the gender roles. Um, and it really just helps you to accept and understand yourself as a sexual being and as just a human being, just a
Yeah.
human being in general.
That's such a good message. I love that aspect. It's something that I don't think many people talk about enough. And definitely, I feel like there's some blocks, especially people who are highly sensitive and people who are listening right now. I think that's
Mhm.
a huge message
Yeah.
to open up and to reclaim and to be curious about. And I love how astrology can even help that area that, wasn't even on my mind. But I think that it's a huge area that people should look more into. So let's talk about how people can get a consultation with you. So I did see that you have a free 15-minute astrotherapy consultation. And so we are going to be linking to Christina's free 15-minute astrotherapy consultation in the show notes. Don't forget to click on it. But you also have appointments where you're available to work with others too, correct?
Yes, yes. And just, if you go to my website, ChristinaFitchTherapy.com, you can just send me a message there and I will respond to you. I really like to keep it personal, so I don't like people just clicking a button, oh, I'm going to schedule for this time. I do like to maintain personal interactions. So reach out to me via my website and I will get back to you. I typically very quickly, at least within 24 hours, unless of course it's a weekend. But if then I will get back to you within 48.
That's so refreshing because I do feel like a theme and message for this year is more connectedness. Like we're all needing to be
Mm-hmm.
more connected. And
Mm-hmm.
so I love that that's your style and that's the way that you prefer because it does create more of that relationship aspect and relationship building too. So it's very refreshing. So we'll put the link
Yeah.
down in the show notes for Christina's website. And Christina, is there any last message that you want to share with everybody before we close?
Yeah, you said that a lot of people, a lot of your listeners are therapists as well. And I just want to, this is a message to any therapist that is curious about this. I had to go through a lot as I was getting ready to even take my test to become a therapist because, this isn't recognized by our board as a therapeutic modality. And you know, uh, there's even some fear that I could lose my license for introducing this, and I have taken the stance of I don't care if I lose my license for it, then I lose my license for it, mainly because I've been in the Western model of psychology. I've worked in treatment centers. I've been in that world. I've held my friends' hands through 5150s. That system is very, 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 very broken. And it keeps people in a revolving door of hospital visits and treatment centers with some, but also a lot more often than not, very little retained healing. This is retained healing. I've seen a very, very clear difference in when I use astrology and I use my modalities versus when I have not. When I worked in the treatment centers and I would get pushback from, the clinical team saying you can't use that. Well, I would still, I mean, even if I didn't talk to the clients about their birth charts, I would still know what it was and I would be able to help them. And I was always able to connect and I knew what was happening. I had the reputation with the staff that I was always ahead of the game because I always knew what was coming up. And so much of it was because I just followed the astrology. So, if you are in the clinical world and you are curious about this, but there's fears around that, I'm not telling anybody to, just forget about your license. I'm actually hoping that this eventually does get acknowledged by our boards so that we can do more, training and have this be our CEUs. And even getting, Reiki and things like that as well, right? Acknowledged. I see that it's the future of psychology, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
especially when we have people like Debra who have been studying it for so long. And if we got the research, why are we, I feel like we could be in that space now.
Yeah.
So
I definitely think it's
let's take it
evolving.
over.
Yeah. It's such an inspiring message because I do get a lot of people who are saying, I'm fearful of this, or, even if they're not therapists or Reiki healers, intuitive sensitives, or let's back up a minute and say people who are interested in this, but they're in a corporate world and, they're afraid of kind of coming out to everyone that they're spiritual and that they have abilities. I think that there's just a fear in general of like, I'm not going to be accepted. Yeah. I'm not going to be this. And what I love is that you've really followed your intuition and you've really followed your gut and you know what works and you are committed to helping people over fitting into the mold. And so we really appreciate that. And I know our listeners appreciate that too. So this has been a beautiful conversation, and not only about astrotherapy, but just hearing about your journey, I think is going to be really helpful for so many people out there struggling with that. And so if you're out there listening and you feel a resonance here, I'll reach out to Christina. We'll list all of her links in our notes. And thank you, Christina, so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Whitney, for having me.
All right. Well, I will be back next week with a brand new episode. But until then, here's to staying spiritual and ambitious.